Hello, everyone. You're watching Be a Leader, our limited series featuring CEOs, trailblazers, and world leaders. I'm Nezha Alaoui, founder and CEO of Join Mayshad, the New York-based company that empowers women on a daily basis and engages with them on societal change. Our guest today is Bracken Darrell, CEO of Logitech. Darrell brings to Logitech more than 20 years of experience in business and brand management with leadership roles in other successful global consumer companies such as Whirlpool, Procter and Gamble, and General Electric. His broad executive management experience has spanned manufacturing, supply chain, product innovation, consumer service, and marketing. He has led growth and reinvention for iconic brands such as Old Spice, Gillette, Braun, KitchenAid, and Whirlpool in emerging markets and much more developed markets. Bracken Darrell holds an MBA degree from Harvard Business School and an ABA degree in English from Hendrix College in Arkansas. Hello, Bracken.
Hello, so nice to see you.
Did we really need to introduce you to our audience?
Yeah, I'm afraid so. They have no idea who I am, and I realize in your lead-in that I'm taking credit for almost everything that ever happened in the companies I worked for.
Thank you for being with us today. It's a very special time that the world is going through, and I'm sure a lot of CEOs are not very comfortable publicly speaking today as they're, being kept accountable for so many things that are happening. So, did you see this coming? I'm talking about the virus, or maybe like something else than the virus that could force us to stay away from each other on a physical level and have to survive through digital.
No, I did not see this coming. Just like I think virtually no one saw this coming. But as a company, we had a kind of an advantage or a head start, which was we were already in the video business. I'm using one of our webcams. We're the leading player in enabling conference rooms for Zoom and Microsoft Teams that we're on now, and Google Hangouts. So we were doing that a lot. We were probably doing in a company of 6,000 people, we were probably doing 10,000 video calls a day. So we were very video intensive. We already had a lot of people working outside of the office. But of course, even with all that, it was a shock on May 13th, I think it was, when we all went home and just went totally on video all the time. So no, I didn't see it coming, but I'd say we're a little bit better prepared than most.
That's good. Definitely, it does help to be advanced in digital in those times. But how could you lead the spirit of the team during this time? Because leading a team through the unknown must give a lot of anxiety in the people that you're leading in numbers. And so how did you react to that? Did you have to speak to them at a larger scale more often? Like, tell us a little bit about what you had to do to lead them.
Yeah, I think when things are hard, no matter what, for whatever reason they're hard, or when they're uncertain, I think leaders need to ramp up the communication. It's ironic because I think your temptation when you're busy and when you're feeling stressed yourself is to get at your table and work, and then communicate with a few people that you really need to make decisions with and go. It's ironic because what you really also need to be doing is probably doubling, tripling, quadrupling the amount of communication you're doing to your team, the broad team. So I know that, I'm 57, I've been doing this a while. So I really tried to ramp it up, and I went to a weekly call with a weekly kind of one-way call with the whole company. And I've kept doing this all the way through the crisis. And I just try to be more engaged with each of my direct reports. I used to rely on a lot of casual interaction, and I have a lot more formal interaction now. So I'd say overall, the key here is just communication. We had a second advantage, which is it's really scary, in a world where there's so much unemployment and it's really, uncertainty about jobs, and we had an advantage that we were already, the things we were working on, the four big secular trends that drive our business, that we're kind of riding these waves, actually all accelerated. They were video everywhere, there were gaming, which, the rise of esports. There were the increasing working from anywhere, including your home, which that's pretty good. And then the last one was streaming and creating, which you're doing right now with me. And so this democratization of content. So all those things kind of just accelerated. So we didn't have to worry about telling people they're not going to have jobs or we're going to have to furlough people. Quite the contrary.
Great. So it is a challenging time, but it's also, like any challenging time, a time of opportunity. Can you tell us a little bit? I mean, can you speak to the entrepreneurs that are out there and tell them how they can seize these times as an opportunity for their business?
I think the great thing about a shock like this for everyone is it forces you to relook at your strategy, your cost structure, everything. And so what you find, I'm sure virtually every entrepreneur out there who's listening to this is saying, God, does my business model still work? If it does work, am I putting enough into it? Am I over investing in it for the moment, whatever your business you're in? Do I have the right people, for this crisis? I heard somebody say, well, I had a few people just froze. I mean, they couldn't move. How can I help them unstick? All those things are happening right now. And the irony of really taking a hard look at your strategy and your cost structure and everything is that you shouldn't need COVID-19 to do that. I mean, the truth is we should be relooking at our strategy, our cost structure, taking a clean sheet of paper to what we do on a very regular basis. Now, I am absolutely a hypocrite in this. I ran my business play for 5 years in Logitech before I kind of stopped and said, wait a minute, I'm too much on autopilot. And I can tell that story if you like, but I really stopped myself and said, God, we're so different today than we were 5 years ago. And imagine how different we'll be 5 years from now. We need to stop and take a clean sheet of paper and stuff and see if we're headed in the right direction, really.
Yes, I would love for you to tell us about the story, because as a leader, you're leading the path, so you're at the forefront, but at the same time, you have a group of people that are pushing you forward and that you're responsible of. And so as much as we like to have those times to stop and reset and think, there is a current that we're in, and we are part of the essence of that current, so we can't blame others for that current. So yeah, tell us about when you joined as a CEO Logitech and those first 5 years.
But you stimulated two different answers for me, and I'm going to try to answer them both maybe if we have time. One of them is about the problem with success, which is that current. And it's what drives the current in people and in all of us. It's one of the things. And then the second one is this concept of how do you make sure that you stop and think and reset. So what happened to me is I got to the end of 5 years, our stock was up 300 or 400%. It's like quite a run. And I was thinking about what's needed for the next 5 years. I thought, boy, this company's going to be even different 5 years from now than it is compared to today, relative to the difference it is today compared to when I started. So it's going to be really different. So I really thought, am I the right person? Let's start at the top. Am I the right person to run the company? So I drafted up a job spec. I mean, pretty abbreviated one, but bullet pointed. And I on paper I'm okay. I mean, I wasn't perfect, for the future, but I was pretty good. I was also relatively low risk because I knew the company really well, so there's no learning curve for me. On the other hand, I had one big disadvantage, which is I know too much. I know every strategy, every person. I've been involved in everything. So it's really hard if you've read Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow. It's hard to disconnect, what you know from the decisions you're facing, and to be really objective, you need to. So I thought, okay, on the one hand, I'm probably the right person. On the other hand, I'm absolutely the wrong person. What do you do? So I really thought for a minute. I thought, I'm going to fire myself. And I learned, you need to sleep on decisions. So I literally I decided, well, literally, I literally to myself said, okay, you are fired. Tomorrow morning, we decide what to do. And I didn't tell my chair or my board, but I said, I'm going to sleep on it and see if I still feel the same way tomorrow morning. And so I went to sleep that night, slept kind of restlessly. But when I woke up the next morning, it was, as it often is with decisions, it was totally clear that was the wrong decision. So I rehired myself, but I had to sign a contract. And the contract was, there are no sacred cows, no people, no strategy, no structure, no business lines, nothing. And I suddenly felt like a newcomer again. And I was practically, skipping into work. I mean, I really felt rejuvenated, and I sustained that for for a long time, and after about 3 months, I told my leadership team, I told them the story, and they said, yeah, we could kind of tell something was different. And then I said, now I would like you to fire yourselves and go to bed and sleep on it and wake up the next morning. And if you don't fire yourself, I will fire you and I won't rehire you because I want you all to think like this. And I'd say most of them have. It's not easy to do. It sounds cold-blooded to say I will fire you, but I really meant it. I mean, I want people to think that clean sheet of paper to what they're doing. That's one story.
I think it's great. And I also heard you speak about hunger and how to keep yourself in that state to keep thriving in life. And so, yes, so for me, what you're talking about here is very similar to that. It's you were very comfortable in your position as a CEO. The leadership team was comfortable because the company was thriving in profitability. And so the firing, it's that hunger component that you bring and that insecurity that will make them get back in a humble leadership role. Great. So during these times as well, we talk in our conversation here at Join Mayshad with our other female leaders about the new form, the only form of leadership that can thrive in those times. It's empathic leadership. And so, how do you relate to that?
Well, I think it's awfully hard to answer that about yourself, because I think the vast majority of people think they're quite empathetic or empathic, and then a lot of us aren't, or at least we're not enough. I thought I was very empathic. I never always thought I was, and I am, a really people-oriented person, up until about a month ago. And when the whole latest version, or the most extreme kind of version in the last year of Black Lives Matter hit. I mean, I grew up with super great parents who they divorced when I was very young, but they were just great human beings. I'll never forget when we were moving from Texas to Kentucky. We stopped at a diner in Mississippi, and I was 6 years old. And we sat down on the bar stools at the little counter. And we were with the menus open, ready to order, and I felt somebody grab me by the back of my shirt and pull me off the chair. And my mom let us right out the door. And I found out later it's because there was a sign on the wall that said, "No blacks, no Jews, no service." And so my parents were always advocates. I mean, activists, for fairness and equality. And I thought I was a really good person. And I would have put myself on the ledger as, I'm a good guy. But then I realized about a month ago when George Floyd was killed, that I hadn't been using my position to speak up or to fight for Black people who have been so oppressed, and so much racism, systemic and non-systemic. And it really hit me, it's a gut check, how empathic am I? And so I really had some soul searching. I had, I'm not feeling sorry for myself. I needed it. I needed a big dose of reality, and I got it. So I've completely transformed the way I think about this. And boy, are we doing a lot now, inside and outside. But I'd say, yeah, I think I'm pretty empathic. But I'd say maybe the more important thing to be than that is humble, because you're probably not empathic enough. If you think you are, you probably are. But it's so easy to drift into feeling like and you don't, until you ask and you listen and you really try to read the signs that aren't being spoken. And I didn't do that very well. I probably did it better when I was young. I got too comfortable that I knew the answers, and actually I didn't even know the questions. I mean, so it's a tough time to be a person in a world where you realize, wow, I really lost step with what was going on. Now I'm back, but now I got to stay back, but I got to stay humble.
And that sense of humility is really what keeps you human all the time, because the minute you lose it, that's it. You're gone. You're dead, and you don't even know it. Totally. And so, yes,
you're harmful. You're not even useless.
Totally. And so we had conversation with Black American female leaders during those times, right after the death of George Floyd. And as any white person who is not a racist, who feels that they're advocating for diversity, equity, and inclusion, everyone was asking, what can we do? And so the first thing was really educate yourself. And I did that with my daughters. I went on Netflix, I watched American Son, I watched the 13th Amendment, and I really started understanding. And I really started understanding more of the history of this country and what Black people went through. So educating ourselves, and I think, at the level of a company as well, educating 6,000, 10,000 people is really making a change. And then the second thing was that they told us, that these women told us, is question yourself. And question yourself, and that you're not racist. You know it, because a racist is someone who brags about it, who's, like active. But the problem is that we all have unconscious bias, and that's the majority of people. So if you do not have any Black people around you in your network, in your team, as your friend, and sometimes you do have that one Black token friend, like that makes you feel like, yeah, like I'm cool, I'm all about diversity. And so if you do not have enough diversity in your surrounding, then question yourselves. Question yourself on a personal level. Question yourself, why did you put yourself in non-diverse spaces all your life? It can be your school, it can be. So now I'm asking you the question. I know that you're humble. I know that you do question yourself at all levels as a CEO and your company. Tell me what you found out about your company and you during those times of re-questioning, and what are the action that you're taking on to change that?
Well, I'll answer the last one first because it's easy to answer, because there's a reference thing. I put a LinkedIn blog out on the 7 things we're doing within the company that affect both inside the company and out. And each of those is a platform. We'll follow those up with deep action. So, for example, in supplier diversity, I mentioned to you before this call started, we have 631 U.S. suppliers. I haven't published this yet, but I will in the next few days. So I'll tell you now. We have 0 Black-owned suppliers, 0. Which is atrocious. We have 5% women-owned suppliers, which is horrible. We have 2% underrepresented who are not women. So we have a terrible record. Now we're probably not different from a lot of companies, but we're going to put it out in public, and we're going to be. I'm going to ask to be held accountable for that. So that's one example. But we've got in every area, both what's our employee group look like, what's our leadership team look like, what's our we've got every step of the way. We're going after everything aggressively, and we're also going after the outside. So you'll see us come with more and more and more and more. In terms of really my personal when I took an inventory of my life, what do I see? Actually, ironically, I have a lot of Black friends. I'm surrounded by and so it's really inexcusable to me. I mean, it shows you how much you can miss the boat, and how you can, kind of inch by inch, step by step, with the blinders on, find yourself in a different city than you thought you lived in. And that's kind of where I was. And I think there are probably a lot of people like me. It's no excuse. There is no excuse. It's inexcusable. But now we can act and try to make up for lost time. And I guarantee I am.
Great to hear, and I trust you will. So we will be here at Join Mayshad following every step.
Hold me accountable.
Bracken, can you tell us how mind-blowing it is for a CEO to run the whole game of leading profits and leading a culture of innovation at the same time? And I know that you brought a lot of evolution to Logitech, even though they were definitely strong in technology, strong in product development, but you wanted to take the company to another level of design and more product development. How did you manage that while also being obsessed with profitability, because that's also the core of a successful company?
Well, let me start by, I'll put some numbers out there because they'll frame what I'm going to say next. When I joined in 2012, the company was worth $1 billion. Today it's worth over $11 billion as of right this second. So it's 11 times more valuable today than it was then. We're 50% larger in revenues, even though we've gotten out of several things. We've sold off and shut down. Our profitability in terms of gross margins has gone up by about 4 points, and our profitability in terms of absolute operating profit has gone up by over 600%. So I'm saying that because that's the result. And you would think, because I started with that the reason we got there is because we got so fixated on profit. But I would say the answer is that was sort of a byproduct of what we were fixated on. What I was really fixated on was experience. I was creating amazing experience. And it started with really thinking, trying to bring great products to market, setting an expectation for that, trying to win awards, because even though winning awards don't mean anything, they're a marker, and they tell you somebody's noticing. And so we tried to win design awards. I hired a head of design who's a partner of mine, has been for 6 years, 6.5 years now, 7 years, and he's wonderful, Alistair Curtis, and he and I just bonded immediately. We created design principles. We really tried to live by those principles, and we just tried to create a design company, even though we weren't a design. We didn't have a single designer in the company. So I would say the real challenge is not to try to drive profit and innovation at the same time. It's to try to drive innovation. The profit comes, and that might sound too simplistic, but I really believe that. Of course, you've got to have a business mind, because if you don't have structural value creation, then you don't get the right to invest back in innovation. So you have to create value for people, and you have to be not greedy but needy for making sure you get as much of that as you can. Not so that you can spill it all back to shareholders who don't care, that they just want to return, but so that you can put as much as you possibly can back into more innovation, so you can do more new things. So I'd say the key to growing a great company from a profit standpoint is not focusing on profit. It's focusing on innovation and users.
And the product. Yes. Can we dig back into your career path? And if you had to go back from the start and see what have you learned in each one of these experiences, but just like one thing from each one of these experiences that makes you who you are today.
Okay, I'll go back pre-career. When I was the student council president, which is like the government president for your high school, which is when you're 18 years old, I learned that everybody in there was a volunteer, and that I thought it would be great when they're paid to work. And because one day when I got people paid to work, I won't have to try to get them to do things. I learned later that you're always running an all volunteer army, and you always need to be inspiring people and trying to inspire them. That is a key one. When I went to I spent some time in public accounting, which for an English major was an unlikely place to be. And there I learned that actually, if you put your mind to it, you can actually get good enough at what you're weak at, but you're never going to be great. So I'll never be a great accountant, but I was good enough. And it's important to be good enough in some things. I guess when I went back to business school and I went to Procter & Gamble, I learned something that most entrepreneurs learn one way or the other, sooner or later. It's that, those little A/B testing, single variable changes are important to know, but they're not enough. I mean, it's good to do single variable changes, but it takes multiple changes at once, and you've got to have the courage to make multiple changes at once. You could call that a pivot if you're a founder, but you've got to have the courage to make those multiple changes after you have some sense of whether they're going to work. And then you've got to have this risk management gene that if you don't have it, grow it, which is make sure you don't take gambles that will ruin you or ruin the company. So I learned that one along the way, mostly at P&G. And then I guess, I'll skip forward the last years. Maybe the most important thing I've learned is that if you're the CEO of a company, once it gets to a certain scale, you're no different from anybody else. Your job is just another job. I don't run our company. The company runs. I have a job to do, and my job has certain decisions that can't be made elsewhere. And so I'm not afraid to make those decisions, but I'm also not afraid to let other people make decisions that they're closer to the data than I am.
You've lived in and worked in several countries, and what about the international culture as an American? Okay, tell us about that part and how also it is making you, from working here in America, someone who can lead a global team.
Well, I wouldn't have this job had I not lived and worked in Europe, because when they were looking for a new CEO, they were looking for someone who was an American who had run a European company, and I qualified. So that gave me something. I'd say the most important things were, first, as an American, you have a tendency to see, you think culture, but when you think culture, you think hip hop culture, or LA, or New York, at least I did. You don't think, the difference between Italians and Brits or French and Moroccans, or you just don't. And so when you go to Europe, and I'd gone to school in Europe and stuff, but once I lived over there, I really soaked up how big the differences really are in culture, and how important it is to get into under the skin of the culture, so that you really understand where things come from, because it's too easy to generalize about things and be wrong. And so I would say, if you're leading a company that is global, or you think it's going to be global, it's really important to get yourself into a position where you're surrounded by people who are from different cultures. I have, on my leadership team, I have 21 or 22 people. I think we have 14 different nationalities represented.
Thank you. So enough about the career. Now let's get more personal. You have a daughter, Bracken. What do you wish for her?
I don't wish anything except that she's happy.
Mm-hmm.
It's what's made me happy in my life has been, feeling like I'm creating things, feeling like I'm having an impact, feeling connected to people, being around the person I love, and those are the things that make me happy. And exercise, ironically, and thinking, and always trying to theorize about how things could be different. Those things make me happy. I want her to find those things that will make her happy, and then I want her to feel guilt-free going after them.
Well, this guilt thing it's very important that you're bringing it up, because it's something that women tend to live with all the time. It's much more prominent in women than men, because and that's also what made women at my generation not advance, apart from the fact that the system was not favorable to their advancement. The ones that could thrive, even though the system was not pushing them forward, are the ones who really liberated themselves from that guilt, the guilt of being a mother, which means that you don't have to work. You need the guilt of not being a mother, of not getting married, of like divorcing, of this, of that. And so I like that you wish for her to live guilt free, because I think that's the key to her success.
Well, I love her fiance, because they live a very balanced life. He cooks sometimes, she cooks sometimes. He probably cooks more than she does. She cleans sometimes, he cleans sometimes. It's a very, very balanced life, the way it should be. We all grew up, or so many of us grew up, in a completely unfair structure where, on the one hand, the role of women was evolving, but it was evolving on two tracks. It was evolving where careers could go anywhere, but personal life wasn't changing fast enough, and so you ended up in this incredibly, and we're still in it, this incredibly unfair situation where a mother is expected to be the primary child rearing person, and expected to be the primary driver of what happens at home, and the primary driver of what happens at work if you're a CEO or founder, like a lot of your listeners are. It's just completely unfair. I mean, it's so out of balance. You can't. That's why I use the word guilt. I mean, I just, every woman should just say, forget that. That's not fair. And if I have a partner, whether it's a woman or a man, who doesn't feel that way, then boy, have a serious discussion. I mean, over and over again until it changes. And I've been on the other side of those serious discussions, and I deserve them. And so I'm enlightened, but it took me 57 years.
Right. So one of the values that I live by as an entrepreneur is work hard, play hard. I know that having fun in your career is an important component. Could you please tell us and tell the world how important it is for a true leader to be able to enjoy every part of the journey?
I'm so lucky. First of all, when I play in a lot of different areas, including I love to play basketball. So I'm a basketball fanatic, not watching, but literally playing. I still play a lot today. But but uh, but I am so lucky because for me, I can't really distinguish my work from my play anymore. I'm in this luxurious spot where I love what I'm doing so much that it feels like a game, and but not a game, not a frivolous game, like a game with where the stakes are pretty high, but the opportunity is really big. And I'm always trying to find ways to get myself into flow and flow state, which we could probably talk about that. So I really feel like I'm playing all the time. So I'm exactly the wrong person to ask this question to because it's really not hard for me to balance anything. I really feel like I'm always in playing.
But it is a personal choice that one makes. And so are there the fact that you're successful, the fact that you do have a life that you've built for yourself that is fun, don't you think that there was a hard work that you put in of making those choices? Don't you think that it came with actually much more compromises than someone who just drifts apart from that vision?
Yeah, thank you for saying that because I was describing how I feel right now. But if I look back over time, I worked super hard. I was always a super hard worker. And I used to say, and this is terrible to say today, but I'll say it anyway, and then I'll get hate mail. I used to say and I still say what I believe, which is, there's no substitute for hard work. In fact, it's mathematical. If you work longer and you work harder, you get more experience at the same age. So it's just a reality. I mean, we can pretend it's not true, but it is. So working longer, working harder really does pay off most of the time. Now, I'm not suggesting everybody should go work all the time and work super hard and be miserable. That's not a good idea. My only point is that there is a reward for hard work usually, and there's also a penalty if it costs you your family or your social life that you may not want to pay. And so the more you can figure out how to structure your life so that the work you're doing is something you love and it doesn't feel hard, and even where you can share it with the person or people you love and they're part of it, and vice versa, you know, then suddenly this magical thing happens where the line between work and life, between working long hours and playing all the time, blur. And I'm there. But I've been there for a long time, and I'm admittedly very lucky in that. But I think there's probably a good book to write on this one.
Right. So, be who you want to be is the motto of my life and what I've tried to build with Mayshad, because I think it's important to know who we want to be to start building it, and and um, and we speak a lot of aspiring leaders who are our youth champions at universities and so on about the importance to figuring out who you want to be. Do you think that in your path it's something that you found at an early age and that has empowered somehow your path?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of two things. One is goals. So goals. You mentioned my view on hunger, and I think hunger is a physical thing, but goals create gaps. And if you think of a goal as creating a gap like an empty stomach, and if you really have conviction around your goal, you want to fill the gap, which is the hunger to make that happen. So goals are the subsets below this thing about vision for your life that you have, and not enough people probably have. I was lucky that very early in my life I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a leader. I wanted to be a high impact leader. At one point I thought I want to be president or I want to be a senator. And then I got disillusioned with politics and how bureaucratic it is and slow. And I thought, I'll do this through business. This is where I can make a big impact. So I had goals, very specific goals, very early in my life, as early as 16, 17. And then when I was in my early 20s, I had written down, 2021 are written down. I want to be a CEO by this age. I want to be, I wanted to write a book, which I haven't done. So I had really specific goals. They weren't bucket list goals because I don't like the concept of bucket list. It sounds like you did it and it's behind you. They're always building things that you could build upon. Always, that's the way I was always kind of wired.
That's great. So in our network, we have a lot of women that are senior executives that needed to reinvent themselves. They went out as consultants. It was a trend in the past 10 years. A lot of people got burnt out in corporations that are not as fun as working for Logitech. And
but we're burning people out too.
They find themselves in a position where, especially now with COVID, where they totally need to reinvent themselves. What do you have to say as a professional leader to these women in creating change in their life?
Well, first, please apply to Logitech because I do think we're a pretty good place to work. And and I'm not joking. So, but that aside, I guess when you're trying to reinvent yourself, it's really fun. I mean, because you're really trying to think first, what do I love to do? What do I dream could be done? And how can those intersect? And then what capabilities do I need that I don't have? One thing's for sure, you can do almost anything you can imagine. There's almost nothing you could think of that you can't do if you really want to do it. But you've got to first feel what it is, and then you got to have a real conviction around it. Once you've got that, it's like a vision or a goal or it's a strategy. Once you have that, here's what I really want, and I really want to do it. You will make it happen. You will lay out a plan for how to get there. You'll break it down like a great project manager, and you'll execute it like a great COO. And because it's your life, it's not a fiction. This is the real thing, And if you really get conviction and then you break it down and then you start to execute against it, you're going to run into problems. You always run into problems. You're going to hit the wall. It's not going to work. Nothing happened like you thought it would, except this and that. And so then you're going to have to pivot or change it. But you will, because you've got enough resilience and conviction. You're going to get through it. You're going to climb over it. Maybe you change it a little bit. Leave your vision broad enough that even if it's not exactly as precise as some people would tell you, it's still out there when the inevitable challenges come. So I love this period of reinvention. I wish everybody reinvented themselves on a more regular basis, including me. And I hope everybody who's watching or listening to this does it soon.
Thank you, Bracken Darrell, for joining us today. You were watching Be a Leader, our limited series featuring CEOs, trailblazers, and world leaders.